Okay, here's your video lesson. This is a new sheet that I'm sending you in the email that this lesson link has. And this is a sheet called Additive Rhythms Beat Patterns. What does this mean? Well, we know what a beat is, a beat pattern. This is a sheet that has a bunch of different beats that are all in different time signatures. To remind you, what is a time signature? Time signature are those two numbers at the left side of the sheet that tell you how many counts are in the bar and what kind of counts those are. And most often we see 4, 4. And that means that there are 4 counts in the bar, and those are, the 4 down there, are 4 quarter notes. If you saw a time signature of 4/8, it would mean that each bar is only 4/8 notes long. What it also means is that whatever the bottom number is, if say it's 4 and for quarter notes or 8 for eighth notes, that is the type of note in the bar that gets the number count. So for example, a bar of 4/4, we can play any number of notes inside of it. They're just not quarter notes. We can play 1, so we can play 16 notes in a bar of 4/4, but the number is the quarter note. 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a. So this sheet is a bunch of very simple beat patterns based in different time signatures. And why is it called additive rhythm? What it means to use the term additive in this context is that all of the time signatures are made up of either combinations of 2 counts or 3 counts. So 4/4 is made up of 2 sets of 2. 3/4 is made up of 1 set of 3. 5/4 is made up of a set of 3 and a set of 2, either 3 plus 2 or 2 plus 3. But it can never be 4 plus 1. Same as 3/4 would never be 2 plus 1. You never see a time signature that has only 1 count in it. It's just not the way it's done. So we always think of things as being groupings of 2 and 3. We don't really think of it in 4/4 because we're so used to counting in 4. But theoretically, 4/4 is made up of 2 sets of 2. So every one of these beats is simply bass drum or snare drum with eighth notes on the hi-hat. So the very first bar, as you can see, is our basic beat. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Each subsequent bar is a different arrangement of whether it's bass or snare, suggesting different types of groupings. So the first one is this 1 and 2 and, a 2-count grouping that's repeated twice. The next one, 1 and 2 and, there's the same grouping again, but then it's 3 and 4 and. So bass drum is another type of 2-count group. And so we can go around and play these different beat patterns using these different types of groupings just to sort of reinforce this idea that the time signatures are made up of these units of 3 and units of 2. In 4/4 you don't really notice it, but when you get 3/4, 5/4, other things like that, you'll start to really feel these combinations of 2 and 3. So I'm going to play the sheet as written. I will stop when the time signature is about to change to talk about it. And I'm going to play as written. It means you play each different beat twice. When you see at the end of the second line that there's a 3/4 time signature, but it's at the end of the line, that is a heads up to tell you that the time signature is changing for the next bar. So you'll see that as the sheet goes down. When the time signature is about to change, you get a little heads up. When the time signature changes, say to 3/4, you're still counting 1 and 2 and 3 and, but then 1 comes right after that. So it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. So the quarter notes and eighth notes do not change speed. It just changes how many are in a single bar of music. So I'm just going to play the first 4 bars of these different 4/4 rhythms. What these will help you do is break out of any habits of feeling like snare drum always follows bass drum, boom, bop, boom, bop. Because you're going to have things where you go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and you'll find yourself getting caught by that. The fourth bar of the 4/4 section starts on the snare drum, which is also weird. You'll probably, the first time you do it, automatically start with a bass drum because that's just what we're so used to. So here we go, the 4/4 section. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Repeat. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Next bar. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. Next line. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now we go to 3/4. And I'm going to count myself in. 1 and 2 and 3 and start. 1 and 2 and 3 and 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 5/4. Now with 5/4, you're going to see groups of 2 plus groups of 3. And now we're at the situation, or at the point in this sheet where everything you're going to play that makes up the next few beats, the rest of the page in fact, you've played already because you've played all these different combinations of 3 groupings and 2 groupings. So you've played everything, it's just a matter of staying in time with how long the bar is. So here we go. There's 5 different bars of 5/4 here. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 5 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 5 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 1 and 2 and 4 and 5 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 1 and 2 and 4 and 5 and 6/4. 6/4 isn't all that exciting because it's really just 3/4 doubled up. And there's only so many ways you can break it up. You're going to do it in 2 sets of 3 or 3 sets of 2. You can get creative with where the bass drum and snare drum goes, obviously, and you can play any kind of beat you want. You can play 1 and a 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and something really complicated. But to help us understand this, we're playing these very simple bass, snare, back and forth type rhythms. So here we go. Bar 14, which is the 6/4 section, just 2 bars. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 6 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and finally 7/4. 3 different bars of 7/4. Now you can play 8/4, 9/4, 17/4. You can make any time signature you want that fits your music. But this is just the beginning of the idea of no matter what time signature you make, whether if you make 17/4, it's still going to be broken down into groupings of 3 and 2. Off the top of my head, you could make 17 out of 3 plus 3 plus 3 is 9. Plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2. 9 plus 8 is 17. Anyway, here we go. 7/4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 1 and 2 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 6 and 7 and. Okay. Practice this slow. Counting is super important because you want to make sure you know where count 1 is. It's possible to kind of just zone out on this sheet and just decide whether you're playing a bass drum or a snare drum and just kind of follow the dots and not think about the counts. But I don't want you to do that. Count every bar properly. One way to help you do that is to add the crash cymbal. So what I'm going to do is just give you the example of the 3/4 section, and I'm going to put a crash cymbal on the first time through each beat. So each line the beat has a repeat, so you play the beat twice, and then you go on to the next one. Crash on the first one, play the second one just hi-hat. So here's the 3/4 section adding crashes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 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 1 and 2 and 3 and. I played this crash cymbal. Obviously you can play it on the crash cymbal on the other side too, of course. So that's the additive rhythms. The next step with this is putting fills into it, which we'll talk about in our lessons. The idea, but if you get sort of, excited about it, give yourself a 2-count fill, like 1E and 2, and insert it into these additive rhythms. So they'll figure out what the last 2 counts, like so in 4/4, the last 2 counts are counts 3 and 4. In 3/4, counts are 2 and 3. So you only play 1 count of the beat before you play a 2-count fill, etc. In 7/4, you play a whole bar of 5 and then 6 and 7. So it can be an interesting challenge to be able to determine when to play a fill to create these phrases. Have fun with it, practice slow, count out loud. We'll see you at your next lesson.